T-shaped lawyer frameworks training programs. And he's delivered these training programs actually to the group I used to help manage in the past, and also to thousands of other private practice and also in-house lawyers all over the world. The programs leverage his 25 years experience as a lawyer working with Baker McKenzie, Sun Microsystems, and Citrix in various international locations. Peter's book, A New Vision for Corporate Lawyers, Part 1 of the T-shaped Lawyer series, is due to be published any day now by Legal Business World. Tonight's session draws from this new book, A New Vision for Corporate Lawyers, The T-shaped Lawyer. Despite the digital transformation of the legal industry over the past decade, there has been very little focus on human transformation. Peter will address why human transformation is necessary and what it could look like. So over to you, Peter.
Thanks, Patrick. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. So let me just pull up my screen. And can you see my slide?
Yes, perfectly.
Can. Super. That's great. Well, hi, everyone. And thank you, Patrick and Iqbal, for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm actually from down here in Sydney, Australia. But I do travel a lot up to your part of the world, and it's great to be talking to you. So, so tonight I'm going to give you a very, obviously in the short time available, a pretty superficial overview of some of the ideas in the book, which, as Patrick said, represent a piece of my sort of programs and workshops and things that I've done over the last 8 years or so. But the reason I wrote this book, by the way, is really, I think this is one of the important missing links, if you will, in why there's perhaps not as much change happening as at least some of us would perhaps hope for, because it's really talking about this whole thing of human transformation. That is looking at literally what lawyers do, what work they do, and how they might work in a different way. So tonight, in the brief time we've got, I want to cover what's your vision, which you've actually answered, really with that poll, why a vision is important and why you might need to have a different vision, and what are some options, including the vision that I'm proposing, and why that's so compelling. And then finally, very briefly, what's involved in turning this vision into reality. So your vision, you've just done the poll, and it's actually not surprising to me, that mix of responses. That's quite typical. And there's sort of reasons for that, which I'll touch on a little bit later. So just quickly, just to go over the basics, I mean, a vision is really what you're aspiring to be. And that can be at both a firm level, and also it should be at an individual lawyer level. Like, individual lawyers will have their own sense of what they want to be. And it's important to think about those at both levels. So a vision is really something which is a picture of where you want to be. It's your North Star, if you will. And a vision should be something that's inspirational. It should be aspirational. And it should be directional, in the sense that it should lead you. It should be your reference point and your North Star to get you to where you are trying to get to, and to achieve whatever overall change objectives that you have. So does vision matter? I mean, is vision really, some people sort of tend to think of vision as being, frankly, a bit abstract, perhaps superfluous. Well, the answer to that is yes and no. It actually doesn't really matter if you really are not aspiring to undergo substantial change. If it's more business as usual improvement, then you probably don't need a vision, because your vision is literally to keep doing what you've been doing. But it matters quite a lot if you're really out to undertake significant change. And here's how it matters. So as I said, it's the baseline together with mission, which we don't have time to go into. But all of these things, vision and mission, should inform your culture. If you're looking for significant change, your strategy, obviously, what sort of initiatives do you need to put in place in order to achieve your vision? Your products and services. And if you're looking at significant change, that will involve new offerings, different ways of marketing those. And then in terms of the people, at the end of the day, you're a law firm. So you've got different people that are lawyers and non-legal professionals working for you. So it's going to impact, it should impact who you hire, the work that they do, how you evaluate them, rewards, and importantly, professional development. So in a way, vision actually informs everything if your vision is to try and change things in a fundamental way. So the default vision for most, law firms, most legal departments, frankly, and most lawyers individually, is really just to be a better lawyer. It might be to be the best lawyer or the best law firm, at least in a certain practice area or a certain region. And you might say, so that sounds pretty good. What could possibly be wrong with that? And you know what? I thought that too until recently. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized there are actually a number of problems potentially with that idea. Firstly, does it actually lead to true client centricity? Or does it, by definition, encourage an internal focus? Because, if the idea is that you're trying to be better lawyers, improve your knowledge of the law, better legal skills, it's all focused on you. It's not really a vision that naturally lends itself to focus on clients. So I think that's one issue. The other is, does it actually lead to you providing what your clients really need? And by that, I mean, as opposed to what necessarily they're asking you to do. So they have all sorts of needs, which we'll talk about in a minute, over and above just legal advice. And then does that default vision of being, a better lawyers, is that actually what is going to help your lawyers to adapt to this rapidly changing environment that they're working in? And will it allow them to flourish and to reach their full potential? And does it really differentiate you from your competition? After all, if this is what all firms and legal departments are on about, is there really a big difference if in terms of being better at law, having a better legal knowledge? Most GCs that I speak to, and I was a GC myself for many years, frankly, there's not a huge, difference in terms of the quality of the top law firms. So it's not, the thing that's going to make a difference, frankly, is not so much that you are better in terms of your understanding of the law or not, but rather perhaps other things. And we'll touch on that in a minute. And then finally, does that vision of being a better lawyer and focusing on the law, is that the thing that's going to shift the relationships that you have with clients from transactional relationships to true trusted advisor relationship, which of course is the holy grail, or at least with your most important clients? And on that, I would say that I don't think a law firm becomes, or a lawyer working with a firm becomes, a trusted advisor based on just their legal expertise. It's other things that really make a difference. So why might we need to want or consider a different vision for lawyers? Firstly, in-house clients actually want and need more. So most GCs, as I said, I was a GC, spend most of their time not giving legal advice, but rather dealing with the challenges of running the business of a legal department. And they include all sorts of things, like some of those things on the screen there. And they need help in doing those things. And so they need help with dealing with the challenge of doing more with less. That's the classic sort of challenge of a legal department. But the top priority of most GCs is actually how can the legal department add more value for the organization? And I think that's the key concept of adding more value that I refer to in the book, which I think goes to the heart of questioning whether being a better lawyer is actually going to add more value or not. If you think about business clients, and I love this quote, corporations don't have legal problems, they have business problems. And legal considerations can be more or less important depending on the circumstances. So what that means is, if all you're doing is providing great legal advice, then that's a very narrow value proposition as far as the business client is concerned. And your contribution to the business client is by definition quite limited. And if you think about the lawyers that work in your firm, they might want more too. They might want to, many of them tell me, and I know this because I've done workshops with thousands of lawyers, both in firms and in legal departments over the last 8 years. They do, some of them feel like they're stagnating. They don't feel like they're growing. They don't feel like they're realizing their full potential. Many of them are interested in doing more varied and interesting work. And they are increasingly, understandably, concerned about the impacts of technology and other things on, what's going to happen to them and how can they future-proof themselves and be more adaptable and resilient. And again, just being a better lawyer may not necessarily achieve that goal. Some of them are interested in opening up career opportunities in and beyond the law. And they are very interested in how they can contribute more and be valued more by clients and by the firm. And again, query whether focusing on being a better lawyer is going to achieve that. And ultimately, of course, they want to enhance their marketability and their future job prospects. So from your point of view, excuse me, does being a better firm or the best legal services provider, is that really differentiation from the competition? And does that allow you to attract and retain top talent? Does it enhance the value that your lawyers can provide, to clients? And again, as I said, shift that relationship from transactional to more of a long-term trusted advisor. Thinking about different visions, different ways of looking at it can also open up new revenue streams and can counter some new entrants. As we know, a lot of the big four, I actually helped KPMG here in Australia to develop their alternative legal service provider business. And I know some of the firms on the call today have those sort of businesses. That's one part of an example of potentially a new way of looking at things. It's part of the story, but not necessarily the whole story. So what are some alternative visions available? Well, there's actually a range of ideas being thrown around at the moment. There's just two I wanted to touch on very briefly. Now, firstly, the idea of being more than a lawyer, and that's the tagline for the Association of Corporate Counsel here in Australia. So I think that's a sort of a theme now. People are sort of realizing that, the need to develop more than legal skills, non-legal skills, but also the idea of being more than a lawyer. That's a pretty broad idea. Susskind's book, the latest edition of which was just recently released, came out, Tomorrow's Lawyers, which frankly, we don't have time to get into in great detail, but I think the title for that's a little bit misleading in the sense that he's painting a vision, not so much for lawyers, but rather for the legal industry, because a lot of the vision that he's talking about is actually a vision for non-legal professionals doing work to build and maintain these systems, which he says will provide the outcomes clients want, rather than lawyers doing it directly. In fact, his vision for lawyers is frankly a very narrow one, a little bit quite pessimistic actually, and limited to a very narrow role of a trusted advisor in a very narrow sense, and what he calls an enhanced practitioner. But I think of all of these ideas, I think the missing link, it's not about technology, although that obviously plays a part. It's not about design or being strategic or even the law. To me, the key concept, and if you like, the big idea behind the vision that I'm proposing is business. Now, you may say, that's nothing new. I mean, all our lawyers are very commercial and understand the business very well. Well, to which I'd say a couple of things. Firstly, I'd say that that's not actually my own experience in dealing with a lot of law firms. There are, as I say, I've worked with up close and personal with a lot of lawyers from law firms and in-house legal departments. And frankly, they aren't that commercial and their knowledge of the business is very limited. But more importantly, I think clients, many GCs, many business clients and execs tell me that they don't feel that way either about lawyers. But what I'm talking about here, even if your lawyers are very commercial and business oriented, I'm not talking about the idea of understanding the business and giving good, commercial legal advice. Now, that's what I'm not talking about. I'm talking about the idea of a lawyer being different, a different lawyer, not a better lawyer, but a different lawyer. And in particular, I'm talking about a lawyer being a business person, not just a lawyer. I'm talking about that person providing business advice, not just giving legal advice. And I'm talking about that lawyer doing business work, not just doing legal work. So I'll explain what I mean by those ideas just in a minute. But basically, this involves, frankly, more than just an improvement. It involves a transformation for most lawyers into something completely different. So there's a couple of ideas out there in the business world. One of them, which we can use to help kind of bring this idea together. One is the idea of the expert generalist, which you may have heard of, made popular by Bain & Company and the chairman of Bain & Company. And that's this idea that, you don't want to be a generalist, but if you're just an expert, just a specialist, then that's of limited value. The real sweet spot, as it were, is this idea of an expert generalist. So we can translate that to capture the idea I'm talking about by thinking about the idea of a legal expert and a business generalist. So that's one idea we can use. But I think there's an even better idea, and that's the idea of the T-shaped professional. So just very quickly, most professionals, whether they're lawyers, accountants, whatever, are very I-shaped. In other words, a deep expertise in one area, but frankly, not much expertise beyond that or experience beyond that. Whereas a T-shaped person has a deep expertise in one area, but also a level of skills and experience, but not to the same extent in a wide range of things. So most lawyers are relatively I-shaped. They have very deep legal knowledge and legal skills, some business knowledge, and some development of soft skills, but frankly, only to the extent necessary to provide legal services and do legal advice. My idea, the vision that I'm talking about here, is really this idea. This is a graphic that tries to capture that a little bit more clearly. So yes, the bulk of what a T-shaped lawyer would do is to provide legal advice and give legal work and do legal work. But it's also the idea of doing business work and providing business input and advice. And I go into that in some detail in the book, but just very briefly, business partnering is the idea of helping clients to achieve their business objectives and to prevent and solve business problems, and also to identify and exploit business opportunities. And that involves things such as raising, business problems with ideas, pointing out non-legal risks, and various other things that can be done in a very easy way. It's something that in-house lawyers can do quite easily, but it's also something that law firm lawyers can do as well. Business development, of course, is something you're very familiar with in firms. But again, it's an example of work that, yes, you've got business development experts, but lawyers should also, frankly, have some capability and expertise in that to do business development. And business leadership is the idea of, actually helping your clients. It takes more time, but helping your clients to solve some of their business problems, and extends over and above doing business input and advice. And so business leadership is really this idea of, typically it's work that you might do that's adjacent to the work that you do as a lawyer. So it might be, for example, doing a process improvement exercise for your your legal clients, your legal department clients. It might be project management, helping them out with some project management, or it might be running a design thinking workshop. There's all sorts of examples of things you could do there, but that's a very brief example of those things. So I'm conscious of time. I'm just running through this quite quickly. So how do you turn this idea, this vision of a T-shaped lawyer into reality? Well, there's quite a lot to it. In fact, I'll be covering that in a second book, the second part of the series, which I've just about finished writing. But the short answer is, it's not about just doing a random selection of non-legal skills. There's a lot more to it than that. There are some specific non-legal skills that are very important, but there's also competencies, a range of competencies. There's various aspects of knowledge. There are qualities, and most importantly, a range of mindsets, one of which I've actually come up with myself, which is the idea of a business person mindset, as compared with just a lawyer mindset. And that's a very important thing, because frankly, there's not a lot of point in learning non-legal skills if you have a mindset that doesn't really allow you to take advantage of those skills to do work, to do non-legal work. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover in the short time that I had available. And I'm sorry that was pretty superficial and quick, but hopefully that gives you a flavor, and we can dive a little more deeper into to these ideas in the breakout sessions and in the session later on. Thanks, Patrick.
Great. Oh, well, thank you, Peter.